What's good, everyone? It's your boy Adolph's Picks, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about tanking in the NBA, how it's affecting the game, how it's affecting betting, the history of it. We're just going to take a deep dive into tanking and why it's bad for the NBA. Tanking in the NBA right now is one of the biggest topics in any of sports, all of sports. When you talk about tanking, it's not necessarily just about rebuilding. It's not about going young. What it is about is just straight up losing on purpose. And that's really what tanking is. It's obviously happening a lot more aggressively this season, more aggressively than we've seen ever and in a long time. People are finally starting to call it out, though. It's a topic, year in and year out. We see teams tanking, but they kind of get away with it. This year, people are calling it out, and they're not going to let people get away with it, right? Owners are mad. The front offices of teams are mad. The league is issuing fines. Bettors are mad. DraftKings and FanDuel are mad. And then most importantly, the fans and the players are starting to feel like certain games just don't matter, which is not good for the league. So today I want to talk about why teams are tanking, the history of tanking, why it's terrible for the sport, why it's even bad for sports betting, and then what the NBA is going to do to try to stop it, because Adam Silver has come out and gave options, and those options we'll talk about a little bit later, but they're beautiful. I loved every single one of them. So let's start off with the obvious question: why does it feel like teams are tanking harder this year than more so than usual? And for me, the answer is pretty simple. It's the draft class this year. It's generational from even outside of the lottery. Like, some of these guys you're going to land in the first round are going to be franchise changing players. So I think it's very, very obvious that tanking is terrible this year because there's a generational draft class. So you have a class loaded at the top. The top four guys are all coming in right away, ready to change your franchise. And then outside of that, you start to get into the Darius Acuffs, the Keaton Wagglers. You start to get into like really high-end guys that would be a top four pick any other year. So a lot of teams are seeing this draft class and they're thinking, if we're not winning a championship, if we're not having any chance of making the playoffs, why not, bottom out and take a swing at a superstar? But the real issue is the flattened, lottery odds. We're supposed to reduce tanking. The worst three teams all get equal odds. But in reality, these teams still won the bottom tier. And I think the biggest problem with the tanking this year is just how blatant it is, how obvious it is. And we have teams like the Utah Jazz that are probably the worst tanking team in the league, making moves to acquire superstar players and then not playing those superstar players due to minor injuries. We have the Indiana Pacers, who just made the finals last year and are just playing hurt. Like, the only person they're really missing from their lives, or I guess they're missing Miles Turner, but Halliburton as well. They just are tanking, not playing their guys, not trying to win. It's very, very obvious. Going out there and get beat by the Washington Wizards. And the Wizards are a bad team that I can respect. They're playing the guys like this is what the Wizards have. Like, obviously AD and Trey aren't playing, but those guys were hurt coming into it anyways. AD's always hurt. He wasn't going to play the rest of the season with Dallas. Trae Young, I would like to see him out on the floor, but they kind of did the same thing as Utah, right? So I thought I respected them. The more I think about it, they did the same thing as Utah, so I don't really know. But they're still trying to win games right now, so they do have a positive there. I don't know. I just don't like teams managing and sitting healthy players and then prioritizing draft positioning over competitiveness. So the league is clearly noticing this. We saw fines handed out to the Jazz, to the Pacers. I think the Mavericks might have got a fine, if I'm not mistaken. But on the history of tanking, let's talk a little bit about that. It's not new, right? It's been around for a while. Before 85, I think, is when they introduced the lottery system. So the worst teams were literally flipping a coin back then to see who got the top pick. That obviously, we did away with that early, and thank God for that we did, for the lottery, right? Because the league introduced the lottery to discourage tanking. But instead of just disappearing and the lottery being the end of it, it kind of evolved, right? Tanking has evolved. Like, when I think of tanking, and I think of a team when I was growing up, was the 76ers. That process era, they made it very clear that they're going to be terrible for multiple years, get their picks, and rebuild through the draft. And it worked. They got high in talent. They still have guys right now, Embiid still on the team. Like, Ben Simmons was obviously good for them for a little bit before whatever happened there. And then they messed up some picks. They took faults and, did other things that hurt their process, right? Since then, teams have gotten more sophisticated with it. It's no longer we're terrible. It's like, oh, we're prioritizing development. We're being cautious. We're evaluating lineups. So many excuses and things that they can try to say to get away with tanking, but everyone knows what's happening. So that idea of normalizing it is becoming now scrutinized, right? But in past life, it was not scrutinized, and we just kind of let it happen. The thing I hate about tanking is just how terrible it is for the sport, right? This is really where I get serious about it, and it destroys competitive integrity. Sports are built on the idea that every game matters and every team is trying to win. But when teams and organizations as a whole are prioritizing losing, it cheapens the entire product. Everything that the NBA stands for is getting weakened by these couple terrible franchises that have been terrible for so long and going to keep being terrible, and they're just there for a dollar amount. You got fans paying for tickets. You deserve an honest effort. If you deserve the best guys out there. You deserve trying to win. If you're a player, you're out there competing for contracts and legacies. You deserve a competitive environment. You don't deserve to be sat because you're so good you might win games. You're out there trying to get your stats, trying to help your team win as a player. No player, I'm telling you, wants to go out there and lose. No player is a fan of tanking. There's just no way. I don't see it being a thing. And then another thing that people don't talk about enough, these teams that are tanking are really terrible. Like, creating this losing culture sticks for a long time. Like, these teams, the Wizards have been terrible for a long time. The Jazz have been terrible for a long time. Like, the Pacers have been pretty bad for a long time. It's outside of that finals run. Like, you can't just flip a switch and instantly become winners, no matter how many guys you get. These young players are developing losing habits in these losing environments. Veterans don't care. Veterans don't want to play for tanking teams. Coaches lose credibility. We see coaches get fired all the time for this, and they don't get another job back. Like, Willie Green is still jobless right now because he was tanking with the Pelicans. Like, you're literally teaching your organization and your team and your players and your coaches that losing is acceptable as long as there's a reward in the future, and that's dangerous. It also creates late season basketball after the All-Star break that just feels so meaningless. When half the league is fighting for playoff positioning and the other half is losing, the competitive balance just becomes distorted. And it's just not right. Tanking ruins the game of basketball, and the NBA has to fix it. And then for me, as a sports bettor, and the reason I'm on here and the reason I created this and where I'm coming from in the world of sports betting, tanking is brutal for sports betting. And I get it. It's all supposed to be for entertainment purposes. And that's kind of how I look at it. But in a way, I can do it profitably to make money and to, it's like a side hustle, right? It's a way to work my job and then bet on the games and do it in a way that I can make money and I can pay the bills with it. It's something that is ruined by tanking. Betting markets rely heavily on predictability, effort. Like, the sports books are setting these lines in hopes that the game's going to go the right way. So when you have teams pulling starters from games last minute, not being truthful about injury reports, when you have resting players in winnable games, so intentionally shorting rotations, or trying to put in Will Riley for 35 minutes, it creates chaos for everybody. Everybody. The bettors get screwed by it. The sports book gets screwed by it. And it's just all around just terrible for sports betting. And I know the game is a lot more than sports betting, but I mean, they have partnerships with DraftKings. They have partnerships with FanDuel. If you load up a game right now, you're going to watch a game on FanDuel Network. Like, this is a real deal partnership between the league and these sports books. And then the fans are a part of the markets that are betting. So they need to get it right. And they don't need to work with the sports book, but these teams, like, tanking needs to be killed for the integrity of the game and for sports betting's purposes. It's intent from the organizations that are ruining the integrity of the betting market, which the NBA now has a financial partnership. You can't push and promote all these gambling partnerships and then obviously just allow bad competitive manipulation. Those two things clash, and that's my main point with it. I'm not saying the league needs to do something to address betting and whoop-de-woo. They need to do something that addresses the competitive manipulation of these games because of their partnerships with DraftKings, FanDuel, Bet365, whoever it may be. And that kind of brings me into the next point. What is the league doing about it? Not necessarily the gambling aspects of, but tanking in general. What are they doing about it? And I think this is where it gets interesting, right? The league has started to push back. Adam Silver's come out. We've seen fines for teams resting healthy players in odd situations. And Silver comes out and talks, openly about tanking and the concerns with it and how he's going to fix it. And the rules that he comes up with to, stomp tanking next year are beautiful. I saw a lot of people talking about, like, I don't know, there's just some crazy, crazy things out there, and none of them made any sense to me, right? But then we get into what the league actually comes out and said they're going to do about it. So, first round draft picks can only be protected top 4 or top 14 plus selections, right? So, that's a good one to change the protections of picks. Lottery odds freeze at the trade deadline or all-star break, which is beautiful. They freeze right then and there. I don't think that messes up the first half of the season because these teams still might think they can compete, and then realize they can't. After that, we're going to see meaningful games, right? We're going to see, obviously, teams will still prioritize the development of their youth and their younger players, but just benching people for no reason will not happen if we're not trying to lose games after the deadline. This is a big one for me. No longer allowing a team to pick in the top 4 in consecutive years or after consecutive bottom 3 finishes. And this is huge because these teams that are constantly there and doing nothing to get better just drive me crazy. Like, I hate being terrible for so long. Like the Wizards, the Jazz, the Sixers when they were doing it. Like, these teams that are just terrible and terrible and terrible, like, get them new ownership, something. I hate it. It just is so terrible to see teams that are that bad for that long. The Nets been terrible forever. That's another big one. The Pelicans have been terrible for like years at this point. So that's a huge one. Teams can't pick in the top 4 the year after making the conference finals. That's another big one because the team that's tanking the most right now, one of the teams that's tanking the most right now, is the Indiana Pacers. They just made the finals. They lost Halliburton, obviously, in Game 7. He's not going to play this year. But now they might land Darren Peterson and then get Halliburton back and then just go right back to the finals. I guess that's strategic in a way, but they're tanking terribly. So I like that. If you just made the conference finals, you don't need to be picking in the top 4. Another thing I think of there is the Dallas Mavericks. They made the conference finals and then got Kyrie Irving and then got hurt. Luka got hurt. They shut him down. They got fined for that. The Mavericks got fined for that. Then they got a top pick, landed whoever they landed. Then they ended up getting Cooper Flag a year or 2 later. It's like, so those final 2 rules, right, or those last 2 rules we talked about really help good teams from tanking on purpose to get even better. Lottery odds are allocated based on 2 years. So now there's more of an incentive to be good over 2 years. If you're just terrible 1 year and good the next, your lottery odds will be changed, right? So it takes a lot more for a team to be worse for 2 years. Teams don't want to be bad for 2 years consecutive. So that's another good one there. Lottery is extended to all playoff or play-in teams. Extend the lottery to include these play-in teams. Play-in teams are trying to make it. Teams that make it to the play-in and do well are trying to make a push. They believe in their team oftentimes. So that's another good one. And then just straight flatten the odds for all lottery teams. That doesn't make as much sense to me, especially with some of these other rules that we talked about. So I'd probably get rid of that one, not do that one. That one seems like an extreme. But that's what Silver and the NBA's office came out and said. So, it's because tanking's been worse this year than in recent memory. And the league has to do something about it. So the real question is, for me, is tanking actually just a flaw in the system or are teams maximizing the rules, right? Because from a front office perspective, if you're stuck in this mediocrity for a couple years and you're winning 38 to 42 games a year and never going to win the finals, and you're just being average forever, is that worse than bottoming out and grabbing a superstar and then trying to build? That's another gray area between it. I hate tanking, players hate tanking, bettors hate tanking, fans hate it, but sometimes front offices see it as a path to contention. So if that's their route and being bad for a year and then bouncing back with a superstar player, I support it, but doing it the way that teams are doing it this year is so obvious and it's just so unethical. Just what really strikes me wrong about it. At the end of the day, the NBA is at a crossroads with tanking. The draft is supposed to help struggling teams, but when these struggling teams are turning into strategic losers, the sport suffers all the way around. And like we talked about, this year just feels so much different because the incentives are so much better. On the other side of things, though, the fines are louder, the discourse is louder, the tanking is less subtle, everything about it is louder. So if the league doesn't adjust the incentive structure soon, we'll see this continue to repeat every time there's a stacked class, or we got capture flag last year, we got Zion, we got Wemby. I mean, tanking isn't going away. It's whether the NBA can make it less rewarding to do so, and that's what's going to redefine the next era of the league. So all in all, I hate tanking. I think it's terrible for the sport. There's a lot to be considered when talking about tanking and what to expect and the future of it. We'll see moving forward. So that's it for the video. If you guys have made it this far in the video, sincerely thank you for making it this far. Make sure to comment, like, subscribe down below. Let's keep running it up. We're close to 100 subscribers, so if somehow we can get there soon, that would be awesome. I am doing a giveaway when we get to 100 subscribers. $50 just giveaway when we get to 100 subscribers. So let's run it up, man. Let's get to that point. And once again, if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you. Thank you.